Ladies and gentlemen, and critical thinkers today, we turn our attention to a moment that speaks volumes about the priorities, alliances, and contradictions at the heart of American power. When Donald Trump hosted the Saudi Crown Prince in what many commentators, including Ron Brownstein, have called a command performance, the world witnessed more than a diplomatic meeting. It was a spectacle, an exhibition of political theater crafted to mask deeper economic and geopolitical realities. And as we peel back these layers, I invite you to ask yourselves the most important question of all: who truly commands whom in this performance? Trump's meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince, widely described by Ron Brownstein as a command performance, unfolded not as a routine diplomatic encounter, but as a carefully choreographed political spectacle designed to send a message both to the American public and to international observers. What made this moment particularly striking was not the optics alone, but the intensity with which Trump appeared to manage every detail to create an illusion of absolute authority. Yet beneath the dazzling surface of photo ops, rehearsed compliments, and calculated handshakes lay a deeper question: who was commanding the performance, and who was performing for whom? In the political world, appearances often carry as much weight as policy. Trump understood this well. He needed to present himself as a global power broker, a leader capable of commanding loyalty from wealthy and influential foreign partners. Hosting Mohammed bin Salman with such flamboyance allowed him to project control, confidence, and diplomatic dominance. But the more extravagant the display became, the more it revealed something else, a dependency that undercut the very posture Trump hoped to portray. The performance may have been his, but the command seemed to originate elsewhere. And that is the hook that Brownstein captured perfectly. A performance is only as powerful as the audience believes it to be. Behind the smiles, Trump displayed a willingness to overlook controversies surrounding Saudi Arabia's leadership, from aggressive regional policies to internationally condemned human rights issues. Instead, he emphasized the Crown Prince's importance as a partner in economic and military deals. The theatrics were deliberate camera-ready announcements of multi-billion-dollar arms purchases, exaggerated praise for Saudi reforms, and public assurances that America's relationship with the kingdom had never been stronger. These moments were intended to paint Trump as a decisive statesman. But observers quickly noted that such overt displays often signal insecurity rather than strength. A truly dominant actor does not need to advertise dominance. What Brownstein highlighted was the striking imbalance hidden behind the grand staging. The U.S. relies heavily on Saudi oil pricing, investment capital, and strategic Middle Eastern influence. The Crown Prince, knowing this, entered the White House not as a subordinate, but as someone fully aware of the leverage he held. Every compliment Trump offered, every handshake he exaggerated, reinforced the appearance that the U.S. was eager, perhaps too eager, to stay in Saudi Arabia's good graces. That eagerness transformed Trump's hosting into something that looked less like leadership and more like performance. And here lies the irony. Trump intended to demonstrate control, yet the spectacle revealed constraint. What was meant to showcase American strength instead highlighted the limits of that strength. The command performance illuminated the truth that geopolitical power today is not defined solely by military might or presidential showmanship, but by economic interdependence, strategic necessity, and the uncomfortable reality that even superpowers sometimes need to act for the approval of their partners. Brownstein's reaction to Trump's hosting of the Saudi Crown Prince goes far deeper than political commentary. It exposes a structural vulnerability behind the spectacle. His analysis suggests that while Trump attempted to present the meeting as a display of American authority, the underlying dynamics told a very different story. What Brownstein saw was not dominance, but dependence, not command, but concession. And here lies the hook that reshapes the entire narrative. When a nation must flatter its partners to maintain leverage, who truly holds the power? For decades, the United States has framed itself as the guiding force in global affairs, the nation that others must impress or appease. Yet Brownstein's interpretation flips this notion on its head. He argues that Trump's enthusiastic reception of the Saudi crown prince revealed the quiet truth that America's geopolitical influence now often hinges on relationships it cannot afford to lose. Saudi Arabia is no ordinary partner. It controls vast oil reserves, exercises enormous influence in global energy markets, and invests heavily in American industries and defense sectors. The U.S. needs Saudi cooperation for economic stability, strategic positioning in the Middle East, and continued flow of capital into American markets. That need shapes American behavior far more than diplomatic rhetoric ever admits. Trump's extravagant praise, the glowing photo ops, and the carefully staged signals of unity were outward attempts to reaffirm a bond. But to observers like Brownstein, they exposed an uncomfortable reality. Washington may claim leadership, but it behaves increasingly like a state negotiating from a position of necessity. The more Trump tried to showcase control, the more obvious it became that U.S. foreign policy is constrained by the very alliances it once dictated. It's a powerful irony, an empire shaped by its dependencies. Brownstein's framing of the meeting as revealing vulnerability is especially significant because it challenges long-standing assumptions about American foreign policy. The United States has traditionally used its power to pressure others, but this meeting revealed a reversal. It suggested that Washington's leverage is eroding, and that its partners, particularly wealthy, authoritarian states, recognize the opportunity to assert their own terms. Saudi Arabia, aware of America's geopolitical and economic needs, stepped into the conversation not as an obedient ally, but as a power in its own right. This shift is what makes Brownstein's analysis so compelling. Trump's performance wasn't simply theatrical. It was symptomatic of a broader transformation in global politics, a world where the U.S. no longer commands unchallenged authority and where alliances reflect mutual dependency rather than American dominance. And the most revealing part of all is that the vulnerability Brownstein identifies did not emerge through failure, scandal, or crisis, but through the very performance Trump intended to showcase as strength. It is the kind of irony that defines modern geopolitics. Power displayed loudly often hides the quiet erosion underneath. The tension between strategic alliances and human rights concerns sits at the heart of modern geopolitics, and nowhere is this tension more visible than in the U.S.-Saudi relationship. Trump's warm embrace of the Saudi crown prince, despite global outrage surrounding issues like the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, political repression, and aggressive regional behavior, revealed a defining truth about American foreign policy. When billions of dollars and strategic advantages are at stake, moral principles often slip quietly out the back door. And here's the unsettling hook. What does it mean when the world's leading democracy eagerly applauds an authoritarian partner while ignoring the very values it claims to defend? The meeting symbolized this contradiction with remarkable clarity. Saudi Arabia's human rights record has long been criticized by international observers. Strict limitations on free speech, suppression of dissent, and harsh crackdowns on activists. Yet none of this seemed to temper Trump's enthusiasm. Instead, he praised the Crown Prince's leadership, modernization efforts, and contributions to regional stability. The performance was polished, intentional, and designed to highlight partnership rather than contradiction. But to viewers attuned to global politics, the silence surrounding human rights was louder than any praise Trump could offer. This political choreography illuminates a broader pattern. The United States, particularly under administrations with a transactional world, often prioritizes economic and strategic benefits over democratic ideals. Saudi Arabia offers enormous leverage, energy market influence, counterterrorism cooperation, and a massive appetite for U.S. weapons systems. These incentives have consistently shaped Washington's tone. Firm in private at times, but publicly deferential when the stakes are high. And in this case, the stakes were higher than most Americans realize. What makes Brownstein's analysis particularly striking is his emphasis on how this silence shapes global perceptions of American credibility. The U.S. has long positioned itself as a champion of human rights, a nation that urges others to adopt democratic norms. But when Washington visibly overlooks abuses for strategic gains, it undermines the very foundation of its moral authority. That contradiction becomes a tool for rivals, a point of skepticism for allies, and a growing concern for political analysts who see the gap between American rhetoric and American action widening. Every year, the spectacle of Trump and the Crown Prince standing side by side served as a symbolic reminder of this contradiction, a democratic superpower applauding an authoritarian monarchy for reasons that had nothing to do with shared values. Instead, they were bound by interests, profitable, strategic, and powerful interests. And this is where the hook lands hardest. If values can be suspended whenever money or security is on the table, how much do they truly matter? This is the uncomfortable question analysts like Brownstein push into the spotlight. The meeting was not just a diplomatic event. It was a revealing moment that exposed how the United States chooses its priorities. And for many observers, it served as a reminder that the moral language of American foreign policy is too often overshadowed by the quiet weight of geopolitical necessity. The economic motives driving the U.S.-Saudi relationship form the backbone of Brownstein's analysis, revealing what he views as the true engine behind Trump's enthusiastic reception of the Saudi Crown Prince. Beneath the polished speeches, the ceremonial greetings, and the orchestrated show of unity lies a network of financial interests so vast and deeply intertwined that neither nation can afford to pretend it's merely diplomacy at work. And here's the hook that sits at the center of it all. When billions of dollars dictate policy, can any government still claim its decisions are driven by principle rather than profit? At the heart of this relationship is a transactional logic that has shaped U.S. policy for decades. Saudi Arabia is one of the world's largest purchasers of American weapons, investing billions into defense systems, aircraft, and military technology. These deals are not just symbolic, they support American jobs, sustain powerful defense contractors, and anchor political alliances across Washington. It's no surprise, then, that Trump highlighted these arms sales as victories for American workers, emphasizing their economic benefits rather than their geopolitical implications. But Brownstein argues that this focus itself reveals an important truth. The economic incentives are not just part of the relationship, they are the relationship. Beyond weapons, Saudi Arabia plays a defining role in the global energy market. Its decisions influence oil prices, market stability, and indirectly the health of the American economy. When Saudi Arabia adjusts its production levels, it affects fuel costs for U.S. consumers, inflation trends, and the political fortunes of American administrations. Trump knew this. His warm handling of the Crown Prince wasn't just diplomatic, it was strategic, aimed at ensuring stability in an energy market that remains globally consequential. Brownstein's point is clear. The U.S. isn't just working with Saudi Arabia, it's depending on it. There is also the massive flow of Saudi investment into American financial systems, technology companies, and real estate. From Wall Street to Silicon Valley, Saudi capital moves quietly but powerfully, making the kingdom not just an ally, but an investor whose influence stretches far beyond political meetings. This kind of economic integration creates a subtle but undeniable pressure on policymakers. Maintaining the relationship isn't just beneficial, it's indispensable. Brownstein highlights that these motives often overshadow diplomatic messaging. When Trump praised Saudi reforms or spoke of shared goals, he was speaking to a narrative crafted for public consumption. The real story, however, was written in financial agreements, market dependencies, and corporate ties. And this is where the most compelling hook emerges. If the economic foundation of this relationship is so strong, how much room is left for the United States to act independently or critically when needed? The Trump MBS meeting showcased this dynamic with striking clarity. Every gesture, every carefully phrased remark, pointed toward a relationship anchored in economic interest rather than shared values. For analysts like Brownstein, this was not surprising, but it was deeply revealing. It showed a foreign policy shaped less by vision and more by the gravitational pull of money, influence, and strategic necessity. Trump's meeting with the Saudi crown prince didn't just symbolize a diplomatic exchange. It illuminated a broader transformation in the very nature of U.S. foreign policy. Brownstein's analysis makes one point absolutely clear. Trump's warm hosting wasn't an isolated gesture, but a reinforcement of a new, increasingly visible trend in American global strategy. Alliances under Trump were no longer built on shared values, democratic principles, or long-standing institutional trust. Instead, they resembled business transactions, negotiated like deals and assessed through the lens of financial return. And here lies the central hook. What happens to global leadership when foreign policy starts to look less like statesmanship and more like a corporate boardroom negotiation? This shift toward transactional diplomacy is significant because it disrupts the traditional framework through which the U.S. has defined its global role. For decades, American leaders justified alliances on ideological alignment, democracy, human rights, stability, collective security. While economic interests always played a role, they were often framed as secondary to shared political values. Trump reversed that order publicly and unapologetically. In his worldview, allies were those who delivered tangible benefits, investments, arms purchases, favorable oil policies, or direct economic gains for the United States. Brownstein highlights this realignment as a major break from historical norms, one that signals not just a personal style, but a national shift. The Trump MBS meeting showcased this mindset vividly. Trump consistently emphasized the billions of dollars in economic deals secured with Saudi Arabia, celebrating them as triumphs for American workers and proof of a thriving partnership. There was little talk of democratic values, human rights, or long-term regional stability, issues that previous administrations at least attempted to balance. Instead, Trump framed the relationship through the metrics of profit and leverage. It was the language of contracts, not diplomacy. And this raised a powerful question among analysts. Can a foreign policy built on price tags truly sustain strategic alliances? Brownstein's insight is that this transactional approach, while effective in the short term, risks eroding deeper layers of trust that traditionally stabilize international relations. When leaders view each other primarily through economic benefit, alliances become fragile. One unfavorable deal or lost profit can shift the entire dynamic. Countries begin to hedge, diversify partnerships, and question the reliability of a United States that appears driven more by immediate gain than consistent principles. Saudi Arabia understood this shift well. The Crown Prince, aware of Trump's priorities, positioned the meeting to highlight economic cooperation and future investment, ensuring the conversation remained within a framework Trump valued. In doing so, he strengthened his own leverage, turning transactional diplomacy into a tool of negotiation rather than submission. This is where Brownstein's hook strikes hardest, when both sides treat diplomacy as a transaction who ultimately gains the upper hand. The nation with the most money on the table, or the one that recognizes how to use that money strategically. The meeting was more than a political event. It was a demonstration of a new foreign policy doctrine, one where profit defines partnership and diplomacy begins with a price. One of the most striking concerns raised by analysts like Brownstein is the extent to which high-profile displays of friendship with authoritarian leaders undermine the United States' moral standing. On the global stage, for decades, America has presented itself as a beacon of democracy, a nation that champions freedom, human rights, and the rule of law. But Trump's grand reception of the Saudi Crown Prince, complete with praise, ceremony, and deliberate avoidance of difficult questions, sent a very different message to the world. And here's the sharp hook at the heart of this point. How can the U.S. claim to lead the free world when it publicly embraces those who silence theirs? This moment mattered because symbolism in global politics is not just ceremonial. It is strategic. When the President of the United States stands beside an authoritarian monarch without addressing well-documented abuses, it signals something powerful, that principles can be shelved when convenient. Observers across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East took note, not just of what was said, but what wasn't. There was no public condemnation of political imprisonments, no mention of Khashoggi's murder, no reference to the kingdom's repressive internal system. Instead, the focus remained on economic deals, promises of stability, and lavish praise. Brownstein argues that this selective silence diminishes Washington's credibility, making it harder for the U.S. to advocate for democratic reforms elsewhere without appearing hypocritical. This erosion of moral authority carries real consequences. Nations that look to the U.S. for leadership begin to question whether American commitments to democracy are genuine or strategically deployed. Allies may hesitate to align with Washington if its principles appear negotiable. Adversaries, meanwhile, seize the opportunity to highlight American inconsistency, using it to weaken U.S. influence abroad. When the U.S. embraces leaders with authoritarian tendencies, it creates fertile ground for rivals like China or Russia to argue that Washington's moral claims are merely rhetorical tools rather than guiding values. What makes this particularly concerning is that the impact is not limited to foreign governments. It affects global public opinion as well. Citizens around the world who once viewed the U.S. as a model for democratic governance begin to see an unpredictable and contradictory power. Brownstein points out that these shifts accumulate over time, reshaping how America is perceived and weakening its soft power. And soft power, the ability to inspire, persuade, and attract rather than coerce, is a crucial component of global leadership. When moral authority diminishes, so does the capacity to lead by example. Trump's command performance with the Crown Prince highlighted this danger vividly. The optics of the meeting suggested alignment not with democratic values, but with wealth, influence, and strategic convenience. It was a message that resonated far beyond Washington, that authoritarian rulers could receive admiration from the world's most powerful democracy as long as they delivered economically. And this is where the hook lands with full force. If democracy can be overshadowed by dollars, what remains of America's claim to exceptionalism? Brownstein's warning is that moments like this accumulate, shaping a long-term narrative in which the United States appears increasingly transactional, increasingly inconsistent, and increasingly willing to overlook its own values. In the arena of global politics, nothing weakens a superpower faster than losing the moral high ground it once stood upon so confidently. So what are we truly witnessing? A command performance indeed, but one that reveals the United States increasingly performing for the very powers it claims to guide. Trump's meeting with the Saudi crown prince was not a show of American leadership. It was a reminder of American entanglement. And if we want to understand the future of global politics, we must look beyond the flashbulbs and handshakes to the economic forces pulling the strings. Thank you.